Shepard was asking for it for three.
Well, he felt it, didn't he? He was begging.
Oh, what a play by Matt Mitchell.
To Watson, sees a lane, takes it underneath. Montana three.
This is a clinic. This is Aztec basketball.
Aztec Nation, what is up? This is the Aztec Breakdown Podcast. Today I'm hosting. My name is Tron. Important to differentiate because we have a lot of different hosts doing all sorts of different shows, and sometimes we get together and sometimes we don't, and it's just crazy over here, but it's a good kind of crazy. Today, rather than doing a game review or game preview or anything like that, what I wanted to do, which I had mentioned the last time I was on with Austin, is try and take a more bird's eye view of like the conference as a whole and maybe some other concepts as well. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. You should have, if it's not out by the time you're listening to this, there should be another episode soon coming out from Kyle, who you can find on socials at Call Me Kinslow, going over some of the game against Cal Baptist, as well as some other topics as well. And so make sure to listen. Make sure to listen to that. You can find, like I said, Kyle at Call Me Kinslow. You can find me at Aztec Breakdown. You can find the other hosts. You got Austin at It's Austin Bolton. You got Carly at Car McGee, and you got Jacob at Aztec Analytics. So make sure to follow the whole squad so you can get all of the best information. And with that, let's get into it. The first thing I wanted to talk about is more of a fun topic. It's just some impressions. Impressions isn't even the right word, though. Like some vibes I've gotten from a couple of the players. And these aren't inherently good or bad. This isn't a reflection on their skill level or their level of impact on the game or anything like that. It is a reflection on their play style. And so that's what I wanted to talk about. So the very first one, I wanted to talk about Wayne McKinney a little bit. Wayne McKinney has, early in the season, he's had some ups, he's had some downs, to be sure. I think his role, what he's being asked to do, is probably a good fit for him at this point. But I have gotten some Trey Pulliam vibes from him. And I think what I mean by that is this. He, so far this season, has not been an elite facilitator. He has been a pretty solid defender, and Trey Pulliam was a pretty good defender, all things considered. McKinney has been a pretty solid defender, but McKinney also has a favorite shot that everybody loves to talk about. And Trey Pulliam had a favorite shot that everybody loved to talk about. They are not the same shot, but they are similar in the sense that Trey Pulliam's was a little floater in the lane, right? He would dribble, and he would get a foot in the paint, and he would try and float the ball over whatever big man was standing there. Wayne McKinney is somewhat similar. His is just more of a mid-range jump shot, which I always wanted Trey Pulliam to take more often. Jump shots just, for most players, are easier to hit than floaters. Wayne McKinney loves that mid-range jump shot. The one of the reasons it gives me the same vibe is that we always hear about how good these shots are, or not how good they are, but how good this player is at these shots. And we haven't really seen him hit very many of those mid-range shots. He hasn't gotten a lot of them. Let me try and pull up what he's at here real quick from the mid-range. So long twos. Wayne McKinney is shooting 5 of 20 on long twos, 25%. So not great, right? Whenever he takes these shots, I'm like, man, I wish he wouldn't take those shots as much. He's shooting 59% closer to the rim. He is shooting 29% from three, so that isn't great either. Just the jump shot has not been falling yet. And I do think some of that is small sample size and variance and things. I do think even the long two number, I think, should go up, as well as I think the 3-point percentage should go up. But it's just not a great shot. He doesn't have a great rate of return on it. It's just not something that is super encouraging. And so I'm hopeful that he can do it a little bit less. You don't want to ever tell a player to ditch everything they've grown up knowing. But it just gives me that same vibe. And like I said, that's not to say Wayne McKinney is a bad player at all. Like I said, he's had some good games. He's had some bad games. I don't even know bad games, but just less impactful games is probably how I would describe them. But that one shot specifically rubs me mildly wrong. The other player that I want to talk about really quickly, and this is maybe a little bit more of a stretch, but it's something I thought about, and that's B.J. Davis. And this one might seem like an insult at first, and I promise you it is not. B.J. Davis is giving me a vibe of what I thought Keith Dinwiddie would be at like this point in his career. So Keith Dinwiddie is, I think he would be a fifth-year senior this year, right? Because he was the same class as Lamont Butler. So at this point, between like last year and this year, I thought Keith Dinwiddie had the potential to be like a 20-point per game scorer and do it pretty efficiently as well. I didn't think he was going to be a great shot creator for others, right? He wasn't going to be a great passer. I never thought was going to be an elite defender, but I thought he had the potential in him to score 20 points a game and do so with efficiency, which is super hard to do. And B.J. Davis seems like even though B.J. Davis is only a sophomore and Keith Dinwiddie would have been a fifth-year senior at this point, B.J. Davis, granted, the last two games haven't been high scoring at all. He's still had some impact, absolutely, but they haven't been as high scoring. But B.J. Davis, with his efficiency and his scoring acumen, despite the last two games, I feel like B.J. Davis as a sophomore is already maybe 80% of what I thought Keith Dinwiddie's ceiling was. That's the important part, right? Like I thought this was going to be Dinwiddie's. He's maxing out. He has all the experience, and that's the best he's going to get. And B.J. Davis is already close to that, it feels like. He's shooting, what do we got? 44% from deep. He's shooting 54% on his 2-point shots. So super efficient there. His free throws haven't been as good. He's at 77%. That's somewhat of a team-wide problem, but that's still not a bad percentage. It's not ideal for a guard, but it's not bad by any stretch. So the efficiency is there. He has scored in bunches. After the last two games, his points per game have dropped down to about 11. So not quite the 20. That's 55% of that 20, so maybe not 80. But I stand by it that I feel like B.J. Davis, offensively alone, that's the other thing I want to emphasize. Offensively alone, I feel like he's already pretty close to what I thought Keith Dinwiddie's ceiling was going to be. And I had a relatively high ceiling, I think, for Keith Dinwiddie. That doesn't include the defensive impact that B.J. Davis has, which I think is already better than anything I ever imagined for Keith Dinwiddie. B.J. Davis has been a fantastic rebounder for his position. He leads the team in steal percentage, which is super impressive because we saw what Miles Bird did last year, and B.J. Davis, in terms of his steal rate, right, his steal percentage has been better. And he's just so quick, and he's able to cut off driving lanes, and he's able to do all sorts of different, just hound guys on the perimeter. So defensively, he's already better than that. But offensively, that was something a couple games ago, I got a vibe of like, man, this is kind of what I thought Keith Dinwiddie would be, only maybe not quite there offensively, but already better defensively. So those were a couple fun little comparisons. And I know the quickest way to ruin something is to compare it to something else, but that's what we're doing. And hopefully, like I said, they aren't meant to be mean or ill-spirited in any way. Just some vibes I got over the course of the season. Moving on from that, I want to get away from breaking the season down game by game, and like I said, a little bit more big picture. I want to look at the season / I like to look at the season sometimes as chunks of games, right? And so you carve out a chunk of games. It's not always going to be the same size chunk, but you carve out a chunk of games and figure out like what is your goal for this upcoming chunk. And so I want to look at that for a brief minute here. We're in the middle of a chunk right now because that's usually how it's going to work. And that chunk was, the post-Players era chunk. So you got at Fresno State, home against San Diego, home against Cal Baptist, neutral against California. And really, truly, the hope for this stretch that the Aztecs were in was to go 4-0. If you don't go 4-0 in this stretch, it's potentially really problematic. The one school that could potentially be less problematic, at least at the start of the chunk, was against Cal, right? If you lose to Cal on a neutral court, maybe you could get away with it. It's possible. That was before either last night or 2 nights ago, as I'm recording this, on December 10th, when they lost to Cornell. And they lost to Cornell at home. Not a good loss to rack up. And so Cal has not fantastic metrics. As I record this, they are ranked 125th in the net, which would make them a quad 3 game for San Diego State. And this is the last non-conference game, so this is their last chance to do anything in terms of the non-conference schedule, which we learned last year is so vitally important to the committee. And I think, to me, the number one goal of the non-conference slate is to escape with a clean slate, right? You don't want to have any bad losses. If you have no bad losses, you can try and make up some good wins in conference usually. It's not as ideal. You want those good wins out of conference as well. Obviously, those are better. Those seem to be weighted higher by the committee. But you don't want those bad losses. And right now, Cal, despite being a power program, despite, all the hype about them and everything, that would be a quad 3 loss. And granted, if they beat the Aztecs, that's going to help their metrics some, but they have already shown this capability to lose to bad teams, and they also don't have any good wins. They're 4-0 in quad 4, so great for them, but they're 2-2 in quad 3. That other quad 3 loss was to Stanford. And so there's that. It's mostly just because it was at home, and I would expect Stanford to move up their net. They're right on the border of quad 2 and quad 3. So I'd expect Stanford to probably finish as a quad 2 game there. But they haven't shown an ability yet to truly beat a good team. There's going to be some opportunities in the ACC to beat good teams, but there's also going to be opportunities to potentially lose to less good teams. And Cal has shown that that's something that they can do. So, with all that being said, leaving this current chunk that they're in undefeated is paramount. That way you leave with a clean slate. You have no bad losses in the non-conference. You also picked up a win against Creighton, which currently is a quad 2 win. We'll see if they can jump up to the top 50 at some point this year. And you have a win against Houston, which is not only a quad 1 win, but it's a quad 1A win at the moment. So it's the top of the top. So those are the wins you're going to build your resume around. Leave with a clean slate and you're good. After that, the very next chunk is going to be another 4-game chunk here. And so the 4 games after Cal are home against Utah State, road against Boise State, home against Air Force, road against New Mexico. And folks, let me tell you, that is not an easy slate by any stretch of the imagination. The Air Force game should be a win. It's at home, so you're not worried about elevation or hard travel or anything like that. And Air Force has been a poor team, to say the least. They're 287 in KenPom. They're 304 in Torvik. They have not been good this year. Last year they were approaching an average level team, but this year they're back down to their old ways, basically. So that one should be a win. You can never take anything for granted, but that one should be a win. Okay, so there's one win. Out of the other 3, the Aztecs, to me, they need to win at least 1. And always, you want more wins, always. Right? If they can go undefeated, fantastic. But realistically, if they can get 1 more win, then that's fantastic. It's not going to be easy. Utah State is at home, so kind of similar. You're not worried about elevation. You have the home crowd. You're not worried about tough travel. There's some advantages there. Utah State worries me, though, and I will expand on that more in a little bit. Boise State is on the road. They have had some ups and downs early on in the season, but they are 6-1 against the Aztecs in the last 7 games. It is in their arena, so you do have the elevation, you do have the tough travel, you do have their, crowd, all that stuff. And then New Mexico is maybe not living up to their preseason expectations, but they also are by no means a bad team. And once again, that one's on the road. And so you have, once again, the elevation, the hostile crowd, although I don't think their travel is quite as tough as some other travels, but, they definitely are a threat for sure, right? They did just lose to New Mexico State. That was a bad loss for them. And they did that at home, but they have also beaten USC, and they've beaten UCLA as well. And UCLA right now is they're ranked 13 in Torvik. So they've shown the capability to beat good teams. And while they also have lost to a bad team, but they've shown the capability to beat good teams. And I think it's fair to say at this point that San Diego State is in fact a good team. Don't know how great they are yet, but they are in fact a good team. And so over those 4 games, to me, the goal is 2-2. So win at Cal and then win 2 of the next 4, and they should be in pretty solid shape, right? One of them has to be Air Force. You can't take that loss to Air Force. But then other than that, if you win a second one, then you are leaving with an additional either quad 2 or quad 1 win as it stands right now. So that's what we are looking forward to, Aztec Nation. Let's move on and take a look at some of these teams in the Mountain West that at this point in time scare me the most. And this is where I will expand on that Utah State nervousness a little bit, despite it being at home. So Utah State, we can all sit here and say they haven't played that tough of a schedule. And so, are they for real? Right? We can absolutely all sit here and say this. They are 19th in the net, so very high number there. Like I just said, they haven't played the toughest schedule. Their predictive metrics are not as favorable. They are 50th in KenPom, 53rd in Torvik. So the net is probably overvaluing them quite a bit. Maybe not quite a bit, but, some for sure. They probably aren't 30 spots better, roughly, than San Diego State, right? They're probably closer to where San Diego State is overall. They have a good win against an Iowa team that is currently ranked 49th in the net, and that was on a neutral floor. And they have a couple other solid wins against St. Bonaventure and North Texas, which are by no means bad teams at all. Those should not be, frowned upon or whatever. Those are absolutely solid wins. Besides that, they haven't played a super tough schedule. They will, before they play the Aztecs, they will play St. Mary's team, and they will play St. Mary's on the road. So that will help shed some light on how good this team is. This Utah State team did almost lose to Wyoming at home. So once again, when they're not at their best, absolutely they can be beaten despite being undefeated, because this Wyoming team is not particularly great. A fun thing about them, which could also be a reason that they can be a little scary, this Utah State team in some ways reminds me of Colorado State from, I want to say, the 2021-2022 season, where they had Isaiah Stevens and David Roddy as just 2 all-conference level players that wrecked everything, and then they had just a supporting cast around those 2 that were good at the specific things they were asked to do, and just don't ask them to do anything else, right? This Utah State team is a lot like that. They have Ian Martinez and Mason Falslev. Those would be the 2 names to look out for on that team that are just wrecking shop. They are both at this point top 5 players. If it was all conference voting right now, the conference season hasn't started yet, but if it was, they would both definitely have arguments for first team, and both could potentially make the first team together. Honestly, they have been fantastic, and then everybody else has their strengths, has their weaknesses, and it's just a matter of how to fit around those 2 players. One of the big reasons, probably the biggest reason, and this is going to be a theme that we're going to see throughout the year, the biggest reason that Utah State is a matchup problem for the Aztecs is their offensive rebounding. They are one of the best teams in the nation. In fact, pulling it up on Torvik right now, they are the second best team in the nation at offensive rebounding. They collect 42.5% of their own misses, and average is about 30%. So they are well above average, and like I said, second best team in the country at offensive rebounding. And we just saw against Cal Baptist why that can be problematic, because the Aztecs shot better than Cal Baptist and did so not exactly by like close margins. The Aztecs turned over the ball less than Cal Baptist, and the Aztecs got to the free throw line a lot more than Cal Baptist. And those are 3 of the 4 factors, and the Aztecs were ahead, some in a couple of those, like largely ahead for the game. The Aztecs won all 3 of those 4 factors. And then the last of the 4 factors is offensive rebounding. And Cal Baptist collected over half of their misses. They had 17 offensive rebounds. The Aztecs only had 16 defensive rebounds. So over half of the shots that Cal Baptist missed, they grabbed again and were able to put up another shot. And when you do that, it doesn't matter that you're shooting poorly, because you'll just keep getting the rebound over and over again until finally you make it. So in that way, the Aztecs were kind of lucky to escape that game against Cal Baptist. And that's not the only time we've seen that too. Oregon did largely the same thing. They dominated the glass, especially on the offensive side. And the Aztecs, could force a miss, could force 2 misses, could force 3 misses, but eventually Oregon was going to score. Utah State, like I said, best team in the conference, second best team in the nation at offensive rebounding. And so even at home in Viejas, like if Cal Baptist can get over half of the offensive rebounds, over half of their misses, what's Utah State going to do? Is Utah State going to get 60% of them? It's something that needs to be fixed, and it's something you're probably going to hear me harp on all season. I know it's not news to anybody that it needs to be fixed, but I think last season with Jaden Ledee and Jay Powell and that whole group, there were glimpses early on that rebounding could be a problem, and I had faith that it would get fixed. And it would get fixed, but it would only get fixed temporarily. They would fix it for a couple games, and then they would have a bad game again. And this season, to me, is feeling like it's going to be the same thing. Like they'll get it right for a couple games, and then another team will come in and just destroy them on the offensive glass and just get putback after putback. And as much as I hate to say it, it's going to cost the Aztecs a game or 2 this season, I think. So Utah State is a team to watch out for. At this point, I would not be surprised if the Aggies swept the Aztecs this year, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised if it went the other way necessarily either. I think San Diego State is more versatile. They're a deeper team, right? They don't just have like 2 star players and then a bunch of role players. They have multiple guys that can contribute in multiple ways. So there's reasons to believe the Aztecs can win. I'm not saying it's hopeless, but just the Aztecs, in my view, the Aztecs' biggest weakness also happens to be Utah State's biggest strength. And so that is concerning to me. Going to a couple other teams, Wyoming is very similar, right? So Wyoming is the second best team in offensive rebounding in the conference. They are 28th in the nation. They're also very good at defensive rebounding as well. So they just control the glass on both ends. One other thing they do that could cause the Aztecs problems is they tend to draw a lot of fouls. They get to the free throw line a lot. They are best in the conference in terms of getting to the free throw line, and they are 35th in the nation at that. Now, to balance that out, they do commit a lot of fouls as well. So that could be a sprinkle of hope. The tricky part about that is, to this point in the season, the Aztecs haven't been great at drawing a lot of contact. They don't draw very many fouls, and so that could be a thing where, like, sure, Wyoming commits a lot of fouls, but the Aztecs aren't able to draw a lot of fouls in return, and so that's something that could help out Wyoming as well. Wyoming is always scary, especially on the road, because of the elevation, and the Aztecs have won the last few up there. If you've been listening to the show for a while, though, you know that the main reason that I've been against running on offense is because you go and you play these games at elevation where those teams also run on offense, and they're able to do it better than you because they're used to the thinner air up there. And the Aztecs have been playing faster offensively. It's not breakneck speed, right? But it's been faster. It's been noticeable. And so playing their style in their arena could be problematic. One thing that gives me hope against Wyoming is that they commit a lot of turnovers and they don't force many on the other end, right? And so they cough up the ball a lot. They are one of the worst 30 teams, if I'm doing my math right here, in terms of how many turnovers they just give up to their opponents. So that's encouraging. The Aztecs haven't been forcing a lot of turnovers, which is kind of surprising, actually, considering they have both Miles Bird and BJ Davis just hounding opponents. I'm kind of surprised they haven't forced more turnovers and forced more steals and stuff like that. So that'll be an interesting thing to see. Like whenever the Wyoming game comes up, that'll be one of the things to look at is how much pressure can the Aztecs apply, and can they force Wyoming into making some extra offensive mistakes, because they can't get their offensive rebound if they don't get a shot up, right? So that'll be something to look out for. And then the last team that I'll talk about, just in terms of kind of the ones that scare me the most from the Aztecs perspective, is Boise State. Now, Boise State breaks the mold here a little bit. They aren't as good at offensive rebounding as these other teams. They are currently 125th in their offensive rebounding rate, so much closer to average. Still a concern because of just how inconsistent the Aztecs have been on that end, but that's not the reason why. So I mentioned earlier, Boise State is 6-1 against the Aztecs in the last 7 games that they've played. It is interesting to note that the Aztecs have a positive score differential in those 7 games, because the one game the Aztecs won, they won by like 20, and every other game has been like 1 to 3 points, basically. I think there was one that was 5 or 6. So 5 games of 1 to 3 points. Basically, they're all one-possession games except for the one game that the Aztecs just obliterated them. And what that might mean analytically could be a number of different things. I'm not going to worry about that too much right now, but just Boise State seems to have the Aztecs number. Now, Boise State did recently just lose to Boston College, and they also lost to Washington State as well. Washington State isn't a terrible loss. The Boston College loss was much, much worse. That's the Boston College loss is a loss that, like, the tournament committee might look at and say, like, this is the reason this team doesn't get in type thing. Washington State, to me, wasn't that bad. It's still a game Boise State should have won. And if you watched it, Boise State was getting absolutely blown out in the first half. I think going into halftime, I want to say it was 44-21 in favor of Washington State. Don't quote me on that, but it was something like that. It was about a 20-point lead. And then in the second half, Boise State ratcheted up their defense and kind of showed what their defensive ceiling is for 15 minutes in the second half, basically. And Washington State scored like 5 points in that 15 minutes, something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it was something ridiculous. And the game ended up, Washington State won 74-69. So Boise State made an epic comeback. It just wasn't enough based on the hole that they dug. But when you look at that second half against Washington State, when you look at how Boise State beat Clemson, which is a good team in basketball right now, it just shows that they've had a lot of inconsistency this season. And so they can be good. Absolutely. They can be very good. And they also have some times where they've come out and laid some eggs. It's not terribly different from 2022 when they actually did win the conference. And I was not shy about saying I think this is going to be Boise State's year to win the conference. And not only that, but win at least one game in the tournament. And so far, neither of those are looking to be the most likely. But that is what happened in 2022, minus the winning game in the tournament part, because they lost at least one, if not two. I think they took 2 bad losses in 2022 in the non-conference, and then were able to win the conference regular season and then also win the tournament and get into the big dance. And so it's not all that dissimilar from there. And all that's just to say that at their ceiling, they can absolutely cause some damage, and it's just a matter of what version of the team do you get. Tyson Degenhart has still been a beast offensively, which is super impressive because he has not been shooting the ball well from distance. He's at 17% behind the three-point arc, which is bad to say the least, but it just makes his offensive performances that much more impressive because he's shooting so well from everywhere else. That 3-point shooting, that's a trend we can see with the whole team, that just as a team, that's kind of their weakness is 3-point shooting, which was one of my concerns in the preseason, was would they have enough 3-point shooting. I thought Degenhart would have a little bit of a bounce back year. I thought their center, Dylan Anderson, would take more threes and probably play more than he has been. So there's that to consider as well. I will say their sophomore, Andrew Meadow, has been fantastic. And if it was time to vote, he would have my vote for the most improved player in the conference right now. Andrew Meadow he is currently 5th in the conference in box plus minus, and he's 6th in player impact plus minus, which are two metrics that I tend to trust, just for all-encompassing things. And so he's been great. He's been leading the team, the Boise State Broncos, in both of those metrics. The Aztecs do have a couple players ahead of him, if you were wondering. Miles Bird, I think, is 3rd in box plus minus, and then both Bird and BJ Davis are ahead of Andrew Meadow in player impact plus minus as well. So there is that. I point that out just as once again to say, like, there are reasons to think the Aztecs can beat this Boise State team. Absolutely. But those are some of the reasons that I worry about Boise State, right? The rebounding is always going to be there, but also they have their talent level. They have this bright new young player, and just their ceiling when they hit it is very high, and it's just a matter of how consistently can they hit it. And lastly, for this last brief segment here, let's just talk about March Madness for a couple minutes. So right now, the Mountain West seems like a 2-bid conference, and I say that to mean at-large bids, right? There's always the chance that somebody can win the conference tournament, and then you get a 3rd bid, and that's fantastic. But right now, the conference seems like a 2-bid conference, and it won't be a surprise to anybody, but those two teams are San Diego State and Utah State, and I don't understand what is in the water in Utah State that they can get a new coach seemingly every year and continue to be fantastic seemingly every year. It's amazing. Honestly, you have to give your props to them for that. But those are the two teams. And it's kind of funny, both teams are in a similar boat in the sense that in terms of their predictive metrics, the Ken Pom, the Torvix, things of that nature, they're both like right on the edge. So ideally, in the predictive metrics, you want to be in the top 40 teams, and then you can start to feel pretty good about your inclusion. Utah State, in the metrics that Bart Torvik tracks, he has a page on his website that I highly recommend. I've posted it a couple times over on Big Sky, where he takes kind of the most prominent metrics, that the ones that are on the team sheets, and he averages them out, and it's just a quick little glimpse at what everything that's happening. Utah State, in the predictive metrics, their average rank is 46.7, and San Diego State's is 50. You can absolutely get in with those numbers. You don't feel comfortable about it going into Selection Sunday, though, with those numbers. So they have some work to do there. Those are the two highest teams in that regard. Nevada's at 50.3, so they're close. Boise State's at 58.7, so they're out as far as that is concerned, right? So Utah State and San Diego State are kind of there, and we can throw in Nevada in the predictives as well as kind of being right there on the border, but not quite where you want to be. What separates Utah State and San Diego State is the resume metrics. So Utah State's average resume rank right now is 17.7. So you're feeling very good about that. That should be good enough, you would think, to help offset those kind of borderline metrics. And San Diego State's resume average ranking is 27.7. So once again, you're feeling pretty good about that. You'd still like it to be higher. Obviously, there's lots of season left. Not worried about that at all. If they can keep that where it is and just bump up those predictive metrics a little bit, really for both of those teams, they'll be fine. I do expect Utah State to not be able to maintain that high of a rating. A big part of it is just like your winning percentage, basically. And Utah State is undefeated, but as they get into conference play, as they take a couple losses, those numbers will drop a little bit. We're hoping for not too much, but a little bit. So those are the only two that you're really looking at right now. I talked about Nevada with the predictives and Boise State also with the predictives. Their resumes are not good. They're both worse than 70 in that regard. And New Mexico is in between 70 and 80 as well. And so not looking good there. And the problem with Nevada especially is that they don't have any other high-level competition to help raise either their metrics or their resume in the out-of-conference play. I believe their last out-of-conference game is Texas Southern, and then they're done with the non-league schedule. And so this is kind of where they're at. They're going to have to do all their damage in conference, which is absolutely doable, but it isn't the ideal way to do it, I guess, from a conference point of view. From a team point of view, you don't really care, right? And as an Aztec fan, like, we can just hope to go 20-0, and if it costs somebody else a bid to the tournament, sorry about it. Like, it's fine. But from a conference point of view, it's not the ideal way to do it. Boise State, on the other hand, they still play St. Mary's in roughly a week. And so they can help offset that loss to Boston College if they can beat St. Mary's on the road. It's a road game as well. So if they can do that, that would help their metrics. That would help their resume. That would help offset that loss to Boston College a little bit. So as Mountain West fans / as future Pac-12 fans, because Boise State's one of those teams going to the Pac-12 as well, should be rooting for Boise State to beat St. Mary's just to be a good reflection on everything else that's happening. And you also obviously get the benefits of, if you lose to Boise State, it doesn't look as bad because, look, they've beaten all these other good teams. And if you beat Boise State, it looks even better because, look, they've beaten all these good teams and you just beat them. So that's what it's looking at from March right now. We're looking like a 2-bid conference, maybe a third if someone wins the tournament. We'll revisit this again once conference play starts and see if Boise State beat St. Mary's. We can see if, I'll throw in one other one here, we'll see if New Mexico can beat VCU. That's a home game for them. They are currently, at least in Bart Torvik, they are favored by about half a point, so it's very coin flippy there. That would be something that helps the conference. I don't know if that would be enough for New Mexico to overcome their loss to New Mexico State, for example, but it would be helpful. So rooting for that one as well, just as a way to make the conference look better. And once again, if New Mexico beats VCU and then the Aztecs beat New Mexico, you look better for it, right? So that's kind of what we're rooting for there. With that, though, Aztec fans, I think that's going to do it for me for this one. Hopefully, that was a good show. I rambled a little bit, but that's okay. We're just looking at the conference as a whole. And I think that does it. We will catch you next time, and go Aztecs.
On the floor, it's Butler with 2 seconds. He's got to put it up, and he wins it. He wins it with the jumper.
Mitchell's feeling it. Now he's feeling it even more. What it do, Matt Mitchell? Shackle the Flynn for the win. It's good! Oh, Malachi Flynn! Under the rim.
2 to go. Butler has to put it up for the win. Butler sticks it at the buzzer.
And a steal. Darion Trammell will coast in for the layup.
Franklin with 2 seconds forces the shot. It's good. The Aztecs advance. They've won it on the shot by the player of the year.
Miller, he put it behind his back. It's taken away by Butler. Lob it up.
Slow it down! Big finish, Keyshawn Johnson!
Now we have tasted it. We're coming back. We're coming back.